IMDb began the same way a lot of early internet projects did, with obsessive people building something useful because it didn't exist, but they wanted it to exist. Before it became a glossy corporate destination, IMDb functioned like a communal spreadsheet for film obsessives who cared about the kind of information that studios rarely bothered to organize: in-depth credits, release dates, alternate titles, and obscure bits of production history. The site rewarded curiosity in a way that felt organic. I could start with a familiar movie that I've seen a million times, click on a character actor, drift into a forgotten TV credit, and then keep following threads of connection until I realize that several hours have passed. The experience felt very educational, but in a fun way. And I think that balance came from the fact that the archive was built by people who actually used it the same way I did. Cole Needham's work compiling film data in the late 80s and publishing the first IMDb software online in October 1990 grew directly out of Usenet film discussion culture, which shaped how the database functioned at a foundational level. Lists were shared and combined, corrected and expanded through collective effort before the project migrated to the web in the early 90s. And it kind of lined up perfectly with the web becoming accessible to everyday users, allowing IMDb to scale without losing its reference-oriented feel. Filmographies anchored the entire experience, and credits provided a structural spine that kept everything navigable. I trusted the site because it behaved like an archive first and a website second. It moved quickly, loaded information efficiently, and treated accuracy as the point as opposed to a side effect. However, a very big shift happened as IMDb incorporated in the mid-90s and was acquired by Amazon in 1998, which gradually reshaped how the site positioned itself. The database remained very valuable, but the surrounding experience leaned more heavily into industry promotion, professional tiers, celebrity coverage, trailers, and streaming integrations. Now, film information still powered the platform, and that was the primary reason people went to that website, but it increasingly functioned as the justification for everything layered around it. And what sustained IMDb's dominance through this transitional period was its community. It became the default answer for casting questions across the internet, and it embedded discussion directly into every title and name through its message boards. I could finish a movie late at night, open its page, and immediately read years worth of reactions, fan theories, arguments, and production anecdotes without having to leave the site at all. And what's cool is those threads stayed visible over time, so it was almost this informal record of how audiences engaged with a film when it was new. Each message board accumulated history, turning individual pages into archives of collective memory tied to very specific moments of release. Put simply, this was film history. I vividly remember being on an IMDb message board for a film that was, at the time, only known as Terminator 5. Someone on there claimed to have access to a draft of the script and sent a link to some shady website. I remember clicking it and reading through it and laughing at how dumb it was, with the film recreating the first two movies and having John Connor as a Terminator.
What have they done to my son?
Survival's what you taught me.
Little did I know, it wasn't too far off from what we actually got. This was back in 2012, and even today, I still have no idea whether or not it was a prophetic fanfiction or a legitimate leak. But regardless, that just speaks as to how those message boards back then were emblematic of the Wild West of the internet, where anything goes. Mind you, I was always a lurker on these forums and I never really got involved with the discussion. I loved reading all the hype and speculation threads about movies that I was insanely excited for, especially in the year of 2014. Gareth Edwards' Godzilla movie, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Star Wars The Force Awakens. There's a lot of duds in that list. My point is that these threads were more than just being Reddit, but for film. It was a part of the site that was incredibly formative during a very important time in my life. However, it didn't last forever. When IMDb shut down the message boards in February 2017, I marked that as the moment the site began to hollow itself out. The official reasoning leaned on improving user experience, and anyone who spent real time on those boards know just how unpleasant they could be. arguments were abundant. Moderation was very uneven, and plenty of threads just devolved into noise. Again, that's what came with this being the Wild West of the internet. That chaos existed along something real, though. I'm not denying that that was a big factor, but that's what made it so great. The boards felt raw. They were attached directly to the information that people were reacting to, and IMDb allowed that friction to just exist without filtering it into something sanitized. Users were treated like adults who could occupy the same space as the archive. But once that space disappeared, people stopped staying. Some carried their conversations to the depths of Reddit, where film discussion already had a home. Others stopped participating publicly at all. IMDb removed the part of that site that encouraged you to linger, and without it, the platform shifted into a place designed for brief visits with no sense of return. The IMDb that exists now feels very sterile to me in a way that goes beyond just aesthetics. Pages load quickly, the layout looks really clean, and the experience feels empty. The interface pushes trailers and trending modules and promotional imagery and streaming availability to the forefront, which is all well and good. It does tell you how to watch a movie if you need to know that information, but ratings don't really function as a dependable snapshot of audience responses, especially ever since, I'd say, 2016 with the Ghostbusters movie, where people would raid voting and they would just tank review scores. Like, let's be honest, review scores mean nothing nowadays. And IMDb did try to counter this by actually having methods in place to prevent this from happening. They kind of have like an algorithm for weighting stuff. I don't know, it's too complicated, but at the same time, I also don't care. There was a very specific point in time when I just realized I didn't want to be there anymore. I kept using IMDb because it remained useful, but I didn't really enjoy using the site. I didn't enjoy engaging with it because there was nothing to engage with. Why should I write reviews when nobody is there to read them? Checking discussions were pointless because it was empty. It was a ghost town. The site narrowed itself into a reference tool, and there was nothing to do in the website beyond just look at stuff. And after that, my relationship with IMDb became transactional. I don't really build habits around places that treat me like a passing user, so why should I even have an account there anymore? On the flip side, I've pivoted to Letterboxd, which works because it centers how people actually live with movies. The platform is built around diaries and watch lists and reviews and having a personal history where you can see at this exact moment, I watched this movie. Logging a movie feels ceremonial in a small personal way, and over time, a profile becomes a record of shifting taste. I mean, I've been using Letterboxd since 2020, and I get to go back and see every single movie that I ever watched on the day that I watched it. Sure, you get some stupid joke reviews where it's like a dumb one-liner that belongs on Reddit, but if you use Letterboxd in a really interesting way, you can have a good time. At the end of the day, I just think IMDb became one of the many victims of classic internet websites trying too hard to go corporate and ultimately alienating their core user base for the sole reason of just making more money. There are countless websites where we've seen this happen time and time again, but very few ever survive that shift. Sure, IMDb is still around and used by millions of people on a regular basis, but it's just not the same anymore. The community is dead and gone, and it's honestly a shame. But I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority and most have just forgotten about the message boards and whatnot, and I'm just an old man screaming at the clouds. Either way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. This is a shorter video than what I normally make. If you liked what I had to say here, though, consider subscribing. I recently made a video all about the decline of Turner Classic Movies as a network. So if you find that interesting, you can click it right here on screen, or check out my playlist of my many movie reviews and retrospectives. You can also become a channel member to support me and the work that I do. It's $1.99 a month. Channel members' names are being thrown on screen right now, so thank you so much to them. It really means the most. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.